Good morning, Broncos country. Welcome into Good Morning Broncos, your daily digital morning show where we talk all things Denver Broncos, and we encourage you to pull up a cup of coffee as you consume Broncos news, content, coverage, and more. I'm Cody Roark, Broncos reporter for High Sports. I cover the team in person every single day in Dove Valley. I go to every home game. I go to every away game, and you can get exclusive coverage as to what's going on with the team. MileHighSports.com. This show is on YouTube, so make sure, folks, if you're just now finding us or if you're just now tuning in, you hit that subscribe or that follow button so you never miss out on any Broncos content that we have coming your way here at the Mile High Sports. But there's a big jam-packed show we have in store for you today. While it is Good Morning Broncos, it is a bad morning in Broncos country with the news of Tim Patrick. He is officially lost for the 2023 NFL season after suffering a torn Achilles. And this came on the second play of the team's 7-on-7 period where he went to run a route. And at first it looked like he had slipped, but his foot had caught. It gave out underneath him. And immediately as he sat down on the grass field, Broncos fans near him on the berm, it got very quiet in Dove Valley. And unfortunately, it is confirmed. Sean Payton said the fear for the Broncos was that it was his left Achilles, and the MRI did reveal that it was in fact torn. Here's our Day 5 Denver Broncos recap in Dove Valley. First day of padded practice at the Centura Health Training Center, and there was a lot of excitement coming into the day about the Broncos' first padded practice, but the wind was sucked out of the sails after Tim Patrick went down with a non-contact injury. Broncos head coach Sean Payton told us post-practice that the fear, the initial belief is that it is his left Achilles there. He's going to have an MRI, but a big blow to the locker room, a big blow to the wide receiver room in general if Tim Patrick's injury is serious and he is forced to miss this season. Luckily, Denver's got some depth at the receiver position, but it will force many players to have to step up, including Brandon Johnson, Jalen Virgil from last year, Marquez Callaway. But let's get to some takeaways here from Broncos practice here on Day 5 of Broncos Camp. I'm Cody Roark, Broncos reporter from High Sports. Now, some observations, some guys who stood out here. It was a defensive day once again as the defense sent pressure after the offense. Another thing, another player who stood out, I've been telling you all offseason long, Jaleel McLaughlin, undrafted rookie, running back free agent out of Youngstown State, looked impressive in the first day of pads. That was the biggest key that we were saying. How does he look hitting the hole? What does his vision look like? There was one play where he got the ball, defenders came in around him, he got skinny, and then he burst, and he was off to the races there. There were some highlights here on Broncos Camp, but the biggest theme of the day is trying to figure out what's going on with Tim Patrick, a massive loss for the Broncos offense if he does miss any significant time, and just one of the more tremendous leaders inside that locker room. Players talked about it post-practice. So we'll see how things go. We'll have it covered on Day 6 of Broncos Camp tomorrow. I'm Cody Roark, Mile High Sports. Day 6 of Broncos Camp obviously happens this morning here at the Centura Health Training Center. Day 2 of full pads as they will ramp things up a little bit more. Sean Payton called yesterday's practice a little bit shorter. They have to follow specific guidelines in the new CBA, so we will probably see a little bit of a longer practice here today. Some other things we need to talk about as it pertains to the Tim Patrick injury, as we all found out initially before the video recap was even finalized. The MRI did come back. This is just a tremendous blow, and I want to talk about just the impact that Tim Patrick has had on this Broncos football team, not only just as a player on the field, his production from the wide receiver position. He was on a tear for a 2-year stretch, 2020, 2021, 11 touchdowns combined in those 2 seasons. He was one of the more impactful players for the Broncos at wide receiver, and he also brought an element that the Broncos have struggled with consistently. And last year, this was something we played the what-if game so many times. What if Tim Patrick didn't suffer a torn ACL last year? Third down, he's had over most of his catches, over half of his catches throughout his career in Denver have been chain movers for a first down. So you talk about that presence of his size and he and Russell Wilson developing that chemistry. That's a big blow. But even last year, after Tim Patrick suffered the ACL injury, he spent all of his time at the team facility going through the rehab process, going through and mentoring and taking young guys under his wing, other players who suffered ACL injuries. And now he has suffered a left ruptured Achilles and will miss the 2023 NFL season. It's a gut punch for the Broncos from a football standpoint, but also from a morale standpoint, because Tim Patrick is one of the most beloved players inside of that locker room. Players are gutted, but you know what? This is the unfortunate nature of the NFL. Business continues, and other guys will now be forced to step up. We'll dive a little bit deeper into that here in today's show, but there was also some other news that we'll get to in a minute. But I wanted to get Sean Payton's reaction to Tim Patrick, what had happened to him. He spoke with us at the podium yesterday just to talk about, from his observation, what type of impact this may have, just because Tim Patrick is such a beloved character in that locker room and an important piece of what the team wants to do. It's a bummer that they're going to be without him. Here's what Broncos head coach Sean Payton had to say.
It's always difficult. Yeah, you guys see it. Especially a guy like that who's a leader who's coming off, pretty much an entire year of rehabilitation. And so it's difficult for his teammates, for all of us. So maybe hopefully we get some good news, but it appears it's his left Achilles.
Big blow to them as well. And look, I think yesterday was a rough day in Broncos country. And the thing that just continues to stand out to me is the wide receiver position. We've been dreaming of a world where we see Courtland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, Tim Patrick, and KJ Hamlet healthy on the field together. As Tim Patrick posted on Instagram earlier this offseason, 2023 could be the last dance of all these guys together. We haven't seen the first dance, and we're not going to see it here in 2023 with Patrick's season being over. But there was some other news that came out as well. KJ Hamlet was waived by the Broncos as a procedural move here. But the thing with KJ is because it's a heart condition that was discovered there. He announced on his Instagram that he is dealing with something. He's going to go through the treatment process. Luckily, right now, he does not have to get anything surgical, but has to take medication for it. So he's stepping away from football, and the Broncos waived him. There is a chance they could bring him back, or he could land with another team. It's just unfortunate considering all the circumstances. He steps away here to deal with the heart condition, which he is deemed as being diagnosed as pericarditis. So KJ Hamlet won't be in the mix right now for the Denver Broncos, but NFL Network's Mike Garafolo indicates that this is something that is going to take weeks, not necessarily months. And so we're hoping that KJ Hamlet can come back onto the football field this upcoming season, whether it's with the Denver Broncos or whether it's with somebody else, some other team that can give him an opportunity. But now this begs a little bit of a bigger question. Who steps up at wide receiver with Tim Patrick out of the mix, with KJ Hamlet out of the mix? You have Courtland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy. Those are obviously some headline names, but for Tim Patrick's role specifically, who are some names you can look at? KJ Hamlet as well. Let's pull up right here on the graphic sheet. Some guys I think Broncos country needs to take a look at here. For Tim Patrick's role, keep an eye on Marquez Callaway, new addition this offseason, familiarity with Sean Payton, kind of a similar build in a sense to Tim Patrick, and being a chain mover on third down if you look at his production in New Orleans. Undrafted rookie free agent from last year, Brandon Johnson stepped into that role a little bit during OTAs and minicamp while Tim Patrick was still ramping things up in his recovery from ACL surgery. And then there's a former New Orleans Saint, New England Patriot, Lil Jordan Humphrey, with his size at 6'4", is a name to keep an eye on, a good downfield blocker. There's also Kendall Hinton involved in the mix as well. Now let's pull it back up here again for KJ Hamlet's spot in his position. Marvin Mims, obviously the rookie second-round draft pick out of Oklahoma this past year, started to do a little bit more in practice on Monday at the Centura Health Training Center. Sean Payton said, hey, he's making good progress because he suffered a little bit of a hamstring issue a couple weeks ago in a workout non-related to OTAs or minicamp. That was the other hamstring he was dealing with, but he's making good progress coming back from that, is expected to do more. Jalen Virgil, who's the undrafted rookie free agent out of Appalachian State, who made the roster last year on the 53-man roster after an impressive preseason campaign. And Montreal Washington, who was drafted in the 5th round last year of the 2022 NFL draft. These guys are all going to be expected to maybe play a little bit of that role. And why do I say that? Well, if you look at what KJ Hamlet has done in his career for the Broncos, he's a smaller body type, but he's fast. He's got speed. You look at these guys, smaller body types, but also a lot of speed to them. And I think for Sean Payton, he wants to diversify his offensive flow a little bit, because you have size, you have guys who can compete, but you need speed as well. You can't just have size and physicality. You need speed. And look, you have three guys right there, potentially 4 if KJ Hamler comes back into the mix, where you have a speed dynamic that really presents a threat to opposing defenses. Because the number one thing that can hurt you, if you're focusing your coverage allocation defensively on a guy like Jerry Jeudy or Cortland Sutton, well, what about the speed threat on the other side of the field of KJ Hamler, who hopefully will come back? But let's put Marvin Mims in that spot now. Let's presume he's the starter in that role. He's going to get downfield. He possesses a tremendous threat to defensive backs. And as a DB coach, the one thing you're always keying is, okay, hey, if we're going to double cover Jerry Jeudy, make sure our backside coverage accounts for the speed that Marvin Mims has, that Jalen Virgil has, that also Montreal Washington possesses. Now, for Washington, this is going to be a very important preseason for him, because he will have to carve out a bigger role for himself coming into the season outside of just being a kick return and punt return specialist. He has to showcase that he can produce on the offensive side of the ball, and he'll get plenty of run in the preseason, maybe with Russell Wilson and the starters if they play, but more importantly with Jarrett Stidham, the second team unit, and also Ben DiNucci, the third team unit. These wide receivers that aren't necessarily Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, they're going to get a lot of run, but it changes everything from the optic standpoint that you lose KJ Hamler, you lose Tim Patrick. This now means that other guys have to step up, and there is a chance that the Broncos do look maybe on the free agency market. There's some veteran names out there. Julio Jones got some decent size to him, but what can he contribute at this point is another question. Denver will look at every option before moving forward, and they want to see who they have in-house. So that is something I think if you're a Broncos fan, you absolutely need to monitor here going forward. But we're going to continue our conversation on this morning's episode of Good Morning Broncos. We're grateful that you're here to join us here right before the start of day 2 of fully padded practice, day 6 overall of Broncos Camp. But first, let's take a look at our sponsors, Superbook. Broncos Camp Day 5 observations outside of the bad news surrounding Tim Patrick, KJ Hamler. There were some things that we could take away from practice overall. So let's get into some of our Day 5 Broncos Camp observations. And I think first off, we have to start off with Riley Moss and Frank Clark. These were the only 2 Broncos players that we did not see at practice on Monday. We asked Broncos head coach Sean Payton after practice if there was anything up with that, and he said it was a club decision and that he would give us more info later whenever it came up. It could be something, it could be nothing. That's the mystery that we're all playing here in the media game here in Denver under Sean Payton. But we'll look to see here on Tuesday if they are back in practice. But there was a return of somebody important to what the Broncos have going on for them this upcoming season. Offensive tackle Mike McGlinchey made his return after having several days off, excused last week as he dealt with the death of someone close to him. The Broncos provided him with the necessary support and structure that he needed, gave it him some time, but he was back at practice on Monday, and he's going to be crucial. The Broncos will need him this upcoming season. As we talk about physicality, we talk about the pads coming on, it's important to know, I think one thing we are all looking forward to seeing is how does Javonte Williams potentially fare when he gets the ball in his hands? Well, in the first play, 7-on-7, right before the Tim Patrick injury, Javonte went out for a route concept. He grabbed it. He caught the pass, got his foot in the dirt, and he outran Alex Singleton. And that was a good play, but it's also good confidence to see him catch the ball, use his speed and acceleration to get away from the linebacker, to get a little bit of separation coming off of the ACL injury. You love to see that happen here. Now, getting to another thing, just after the Tim Patrick injury had happened, the Broncos swapped some guys out because Russell Wilson, Cortland Sutton, they were tending to Tim Patrick as he was down, as the trainers were helping him out. Jarrett Stidham came in and he delivered a touchdown pass downfield to undrafted rookie free agent wide receiver from last year, Brandon Johnson. And I think at that point, look, it's just the irony of the NFL. You know, you have one guy go down, the next guy steps up, and Brandon Johnson could very well be that guy. And I do want to pinpoint something as well about Broncos backup quarterback Jarrett Stidham. There's not really any competition pushing him for the second quarterback spot. he is that guy while they still have Ben DiNucci on the roster. But here's the one thing about Stidham that has stood out to me consistently throughout practice, so far throughout OTAs. I feel like his ball placement for the most part has been consistent. Now, on Friday or Saturday, he did throw an interception to Faion Hicks, who made a great read, jump cutting a route of a wide receiver, I believe it was Montrell Washington, and he did throw an interception in that 7-on-7 period. But for the most part, consistency and what Sean Payton is looking for the quarterbacks is getting in and out of the huddle, making sure the operation looks efficient. And if you don't come out of the huddle quick enough, he's going to pull you back. He's going to say, get in the huddle and do it again, because you have to get the flow of a real game. And it's super, super hard to simulate that in practice at times, but it's the little things. Because when you get into a stadium, which not this Friday, but next Friday, the Denver Broncos are going to play their first preseason game on the road against the Arizona Cardinals. So when you're on the road and it is loud, how do you command the huddle? How do you command the attention of your teammates around you? And can you focus on getting the play call in from whoever's communicating that, whether it's Sean Payton, whether it's going to be Joe Lombardi, who communicates exactly what the play is? Everything's going to go through Sean Payton ultimately at the end of the day. Who communicates it's a different story. We'll see what that case is, obviously, when the preseason comes up and the regular season. But for Stidham, so far, a good command of the operational sense of the offense. With all the quarterbacks, they've done that as well. Jonathan Cooper, we talk about the pads coming on. We talk about offensive tackle help, getting Mike McGlinchey back, Garrett Bowles. Well, because of Frank Clark was not present at Broncos practice today, we saw Jonathan Cooper step up, as he did all throughout OTAs. He was getting a ton of reps with the first team initially in OTAs and mandatory minicamp. Well, he filled in for Frank Clark today. And there was one play during the Broncos team period that I think deserves to be highlighted a little bit, because if you've seen on Twitter, you're going to read a bunch of different things. Jonathan Cooper had an impressive move off of the edge, and he got to Russell Wilson to a point in a game, in an actual game situation, he would have sacked Russell Wilson. So Jonathan Cooper, because you're not allowed to touch the quarterbacks, Cooper comes around the edge, gets there to Wilson. The play would have been blown dead. The whistle didn't get blown anyway, so Russ just kind of improvised and threw a pass to Jerry Jeudy. It was intercepted by Justin Simmons. The play was over 5 seconds before that had happened. So you're going to see on Twitter, Russell Wilson threw an interception to Justin Simmons while trying to target Jerry Jeudy. He was actually sacked there and just kind of threw it 5 seconds after the play. So it didn't necessarily matter, didn't necessarily count as an interception, a throwaway there. But this is practice, folks. And we talked about it yesterday on Good Morning Broncos. You have to find a way to get these mistakes out in practice. You want to make mistakes in practice. Geno Smith, for example, the few days ago at Seattle Seahawks practice, threw 3 interceptions in one period. I don't think Seattle fans are freaking out about it. So, folks, this is why I think context on situations is important. You'll have people who will tweet out, Russell Wilson threw an interception. Ideally, if he didn't get sacked on that play, yeah, it would have probably been an interception there. But he got sacked. You go back, you watch the film, you make the adjustments. Mistakes happen in practice. Let's not overanalyze everything that we see in practice so far, because you will get to some point, first day in pads, you're going to get in a little bit more of an established rhythm. It's important not to overreact to things like that. Our last takeaway here on Good Morning Broncos, as Denver prepares for day number 2 of Broncos Camp. Let's pull up the graphic here once again, just for a little bit of a recap of the day here. We're going to close things out in terms of the running back 3 competition. Now, we said it here on the show yesterday. The one thing we want to see is, how do the running backs look when the pads come on, specifically for the running back 3 competition between Jaleel, McLaughlin, the undrafted rookie out of Youngstown State. And you also have Tyler Badie out of Missouri. Then you also have Tony Jones Jr. You have 3 backs who are really competing for that spot behind Javonte Williams, behind Samaje Perine. Well, let's talk about that. Samaje Perine had a big run in today's practice. Javonte looked good in 7-on-7, had a couple of springy runs in the team period, but Jaleel McLaughlin had 2 plays on the day that deserve recognition. And first off, there was one play, he took a handoff, he got skinny, he hit the hole. It started to collapse around him because the defense was closing in. He dipped his shoulder and he got skinny, which is a term you hear running back coaches use all the time. Turned his shoulder, got free, and was untouched down the right sideline. He is so fast. He is a blur. He's got some physicality to him. Broncos head coach Sean Payton talked about it after practice, looking at it from the standpoint that, hey, this is a guy who's in at 5 a.m. in the building. He's here early, and he notes that football is important to him. And obviously, We look at the history of Sean Payton, finding some undrafted rookie free agent running backs. He mentioned to us after the NFL draft that his most exciting part of the draft is making those phone calls, because this is where you find a Super Bowl running back who goes undrafted, can contribute. Jaleel McLaughlin looks special. Tyler Badie had a couple of explosive plays in the running back game as well today. Tony Jones Jr., not quite yet. One play, he got stuffed by Josie Jewell, but this is something we can't overreact to here on day one of pads. It's a continuous evaluation from start to finish, day one, all the way through the final day of training camp practice. But more importantly, once games come around, how do players play? Sometimes practice doesn't always give you a great indicator, but sometimes when the lights come on, you see guys flash out of nowhere. So we're going to wait to hold and jump to conclusions until we get to the preseason, which isn't this Friday. It's next Friday against the Arizona Cardinals. The week after that will be against the 49ers on the road, and then they'll close out the following week with joint training camp practices with the Los Angeles Rams before having a home game to round out the preseason. So technically Denver, for their final preseason game, their first two home games, 3 games in a row where Denver will be at home at a brand new renovation base stadium, Empire Field at Mile High, a new scoreboard, and many other things. But anyways, Broncos country, thank you so much for rocking with us here this morning. Good morning, Broncos. Hope you enjoyed your cup of coffee like I am. I'm off to Broncos practice. If you see me out there, come say hi. Would love to interact with you, and make sure you subscribe here on YouTube every single morning, 9 a.m. Good Morning Broncos coming your way.